Hi, my name is Jamie Lynch, and you are listening to Eating Habits, my podcast about everything restaurants. I will explore the human element of the hospitality business, and I'll talk to the who's who in restaurants, explore their stories, and hear what's on their minds in the ever-changing landscape of the food and beverage industry.
This is Eating Habits, and I am the guest on today's podcast. I am Chef Jim Smith. I'm the executive chef and owner of the Hummingbird Way Oyster Bar, which is located in Mobile, Alabama.
Good job, Jim. That might have been the best intro of all. It took us a year to get it right.
On Top Chef, a bunch of the people who did to take you to do the interviews, they would call me like one take Jim, a bunch of them, because just like they would say,
really?
They would say, how do you feel about this? And I would say, I feel like this.
So that was your secret weapon. You were the one that would just sat in the chair, was like, boom, done. Yep. I'm out. One shot.
Yep. One take Jim. I like that nickname.
That's good. I like that one take Jim. Is your food like that? Is it one take and you're good on the plate? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, well, to me, developing food is always crazy. I will make a dish, and maybe the first time it comes out, I like it, but then I'll start to realize that, I really research food when I make it. Mm-hmm. And to me, I give this piece of advice to students and to diners and people who are interested in making a dish. Somebody says, "Oh yeah, how did you come up with your biscuit recipe?" And I tell them, I went to the internet and every cookbook I have and looked up every biscuit recipe I could find. You're talking about hundreds of biscuit recipes. Yeah. And then you start to read them all, and you can start to draw these through lines from, this has this kind of ratios, and these are the kind of ingredients. And then you start to see, well, there are these patterns when you're developing food. And the more of those patterns that connect, chances are good that's what you should be including in your recipe. So, I like to really digest and consume all this information. And then what comes out the other end is what I like to call my recipe, right? Right, but it's involved from research and practice and, taking what other people, if 3 people's grandma's biscuit recipe includes the same tip about, what to do with the butter. And you're like, well, maybe this is a good tip and I should try it.
So typically when you're working on a recipe like biscuits or whatever, maybe it's pasta dough or it's bread dough or whatever, what do you look for when you're like, okay, this is good. This is done. I can work with this. This is good enough to serve my guests or whatever.
To me,
is there ever an end?
That's a tough question. What is the famous phrase about a work of art is done when the artist walks away? Yeah. And it may never really be done.
Put the brush down.
Yes, put the brush down and walk away. And not to say that my biscuit recipe is a work of art, but you get to be a point where you taste it and you change it and you tweak it and you're like, this is where I want it to be. You just for me, it just when all those ingredients sing together in the right way, which makes something cohesive and balanced and structured in all the kind of ways that we want for a dish to be in the end. Sometimes as a chef, you just kind of feel it okay, that's it. You know what I mean? That's it. I used to work for this guy who would say, this dish eats like a champ. You kind of know, once it's on the plate and once it feels good, you're like, yes, okay, this is it. This is there.
What is so at the restaurant, at the Hummingbird Way, what is your creative process? Obviously you do your research, you have an idea, I imagine, of what you want to be playing with. Is it based on what you think the guests want, or is it what Jim wants to cook? Is it how do you kind of get there? How do you formulate that?
It is for sure some of both. And, living in a small town market where, maybe people aren't pushing the envelope of food boundaries very much. I like to make things that are both sort of familiar, but also push the boundaries of what people locally are willing to try. And that always starts with what are the farmers walking through my back doors with, what is available seasonally and locally, what kind of fish is being caught, is crabbing shut down because of the pandemic, or through cold weather. And so you start with, for me, I always start with what's available. And then I think about, if I know that traditionally fennel is paired with these Italian ingredients naturally, and those other Italian ingredients are also available at the time, and I sort of start this process, and it just sort of takes me from there. I do like to push our guests, but I don't like to push them too far. I'm not trying to be a snob about it. I'm not trying to be a jerk about it. Yeah. But if I discover, I'm sorry about that. That's my R2D2 going off there. If I start to discover, if I feel like they're good, they're cool ways to sneak in things that are modern but do it in a familiar way. And that's really where I start. It starts with what's available, what looks good, what are those things that I can historically research and generate, like ingredients that are always paired together, or, like what's available at the time, then really just launch from there.
Yeah. So you're in Mobile.
Yeah.
So what is popular around there? Like, what is it like? What kind of ingredients, what kind of stuff are you guys seeing consistently, either throughout, the year or, seasons that show up often? And also the other question is, I think of Mobile, I think Southern, like straight up Southern. Is that a good, or is it more than that?
It is Southern, but it is also different. Mobile, here's a little history. Mobile is the original French capital of the colonies.
Oh, cool. I did not know that.
And so it is very much like all the streets are named the same things like New Orleans is. And, we are very, very close to New Orleans. And what happened is the French lost the French and Indian War and had to move their capital. So the capital then moved from Mobile to New Orleans. What that means is that Mobile is the original birthplace of Mardi Gras in the United States. All of the sort of same Creole influences that you get from what people typically think of as New Orleans cuisine are all in from Mobile.
Okay, cool.
The first written recipe of jambalaya is from a church cookbook in Mobile, and so there's a lot of those kind of things that make it a little bit different than like what is Atlanta South or what is Charleston South. And
totally.
Mobile is located on a bay that feeds into the Gulf of Mexico, which makes this very unique kind of seafood city and area, and so that is for sure what it is. It is Southern, but it's definitely more that French, Southern, Creole, that real kind of intense influence in the cuisine. Now, stuff that's available all year is really odd to me because even I moved to Mobile from Montgomery. Montgomery's like central Alabama, which is still very Southern and but there is a tomato season. One thing about when you move farther south, like to Mobile, it's almost tropical all the time. Like I can get really good tomatoes right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so
you've got heirlooms in February and people are like, that can't be. And you're like, well, it is here.
Yeah. Field peas are still like, I get field peas year round, like lima beans and butter beans and creamers. And, just because if the farmers are growing them, I'm going to be buying them,
for sure.
And so it does mean that like there are like weird summertime ingredients in my winter dishes, which would not happen, 3 hours north of where I live now, just because of that's what's available and that's what's growing. And, if tomatoes grow year round, more power to those farmers. I'm freaking buying them.
Yeah, totally. Because fresh tomatoes are the bomb, dude. I remember I wouldn't even eat tomatoes until I had like a legit heirloom tomato that was like farm fresh. Because like to me, they were always watery and mealy and the texture was nasty. And I was like, that's not a good vegetable. Like I don't know why people use that. And, but then when I had that first heirloom tomato, I was like, holy shit, this is like candy. It's like a juicy fruit candy. And now I just won't use it. Like I won't use fresh tomatoes in the winter unless I guess if I was in Mobile.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just wild. It's wild to me. Like I wouldn't buy this stuff, when I first started realizing that tomatoes were available in December, I was like, these can't be good. Then, like I ordered this, like heirloom cherry tomato case and it's like, they're delicious. They taste like summertime tomatoes.
Amazing.
And it is. It's really, it's wild how, what happens seasonally.
As you move up and down the climate zones and stuff. That's crazy. I wonder, you actually sparked a thought that I'm curious about now. I'm gonna have to reach out to some people is, how does that affect the pest population in agriculture? Because like when I had the farm, that was something that we always dealt with is like, how do you control pests? How do you deal with that? And having that kind of constant temperature means that they don't die off.
Yeah.
So how do they, they got to have some pretty awesome regiments to keep that going.
I'm sure. I expect probably lots of the farmers are hoping for like one freeze that kills a bunch of stuff off,
right.
and we did have like a wildly cold, like 2 weeks, in December, but that's been like it. It's been largely like it is here today, like all winter and
that's
spring,
awesome.
It's sunny and 70 and,
What, let's talk a little bit about seafood.
Yeah.
I know you're kind of big on the seafood. I know that do you still serve on the board for Alabama Seafood?
I'm the chairman of the Alabama Seafood Marketing Commission.
Yeah. You're all about that life.
Yeah,
let's
I am
talk about
for sure. Yeah. The Seafood Marketing Commission was formed after the Gulf oil spill. Mm-hmm. And so, there was a long period of time where the Gulf seafood industry was just like, are people ever going to buy our food again? People are worried about, is there oil in the seafood? Is there contamination? And it's people are shocked. You see all of those images on the screen of like the oil plumes in the ocean, and people remember, the Exxon Valdez and all the sort of like all the terrible things that are associated with oil spills. But the commission was founded by the governor of Alabama at the time, and while I was a state chef, and honestly, I got lucky that he would even think about putting me on this board, because most of the board is other, more like farmers, or more like fishers and growers and, big seafood industry people. But at first, our whole issue was about sort of testing seafood, making sure it was safe, and then getting that word out. And we really have done such a good job with that over the past 8 years that there was a long time when we were basically like, don't ever talk about the oil spill. Just talk about how great Alabama seafood is.
Right.
But now we're
push the narrative. Like this is the
yes.
Yeah.
But now it's more like we can talk about it in almost sort of a nostalgic way, because like this great thing that we've done and formed to promote seafood was born out of this like weird time of uncertainty and environmental disaster. And it's great.
Well, I think that's a good education for people too, that like the natural world is an amazing place and can fix itself if we don't continue to fuck it up.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you pause, you take a break, you treat it right, like nature will fix itself. Like, I mean, I had one of my good buddies from Low Country Oyster here in Charleston was on the podcast talking about, oysters and how amazing they are at environmental cleanup, right? Like they are the cleaners, the fixers for all of our pollution problems. And that we should just have oysters everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good note that like,
there are cool things on our website. Like if you want a business plan on how to open an oyster aquaculture farm, if you go to eatalabamaseafood.com, you can find a business plan that will tell you like what like the permitting you need. This is specific to Alabama.
Right.
It'll tell you the permitting and like which agencies to talk to and how to go about developing the equipment that you need and all that kind of stuff. Like
that's awesome.
Just because
you got to because it's good.
Yeah,
like
it's
good
sustainability.
To promote that.
Yeah, to promote that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the seafood board originally it did start just to make sure that people were aware that hey, it's okay to eat shrimp that's caught in the Gulf of Mexico. But now we do focus on things like sustainability and like being able to geolocate for people like where to go to find Alabama seafood. And so like you can just open your phone and you can find a reputable restaurant or a grocery store that always has, Alabama crab, those kind of things on there. So we do a really lot of good work, I think.
Cool. What kinds of fish and seafood specifically, obviously, shrimp and crab is big. Oyster is big. What other kinds of fish are you guys using or seeing? Is it mostly inshore stuff or are you getting?
We get both for sure. We definitely get both. I mean, the Gulf of Mexico is just
huge.
It's huge.
Yeah,
and there's
you
so
think
much
of it as
stuff
like a
out
bay,
there.
and it's like it's a small ocean.
Yeah. And
but it is shallow, right? Like it's pretty shallow. The Gulf.
It is for sure shallow.
Yeah.
And in fact, Mobile Bay is a huge bay. Like if you look at it on a map of Alabama, the bottom part of Alabama makes this, the Gulf of Mexico, and then it cones up into the bay. Like Mobile is at the top of the bay, but most of the bay is like 20 feet or less. And these are like miles and miles of bay.
Right.
And so things like flounder are like crazy strong
like
there.
everywhere,
and crabs are everywhere. And actually that's the birthplace of Jubilee, like the word Jubilee.
Okay.
And that's the thing that happens when the tides are a certain way in Mobile Bay. All of the tide recedes, and then and the oxygen is so low in the water that, all of the flounder and everything they're like moving up to the shoreline, and you could just like walk out and like pick up flounder and crabs.
Just grab them right out of the water.
Yeah, then that's where at least the term Jubilee comes from as it relates to seafood.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. But
have you done that?
The thing about the Jubilees is like you've got to know somebody who's like watching the bay at like midnight.
Hey, we've got 40 minutes of time. Now let's go.
Yeah, it's hard to predict, but once if you know somebody who's like watching the waters regularly, and they're like the Jubilee's about to happen. You you go out and grab some some spears and like gag some grouper and or flounder and just sort of get going. So no, it's cool. It's real cool. But yeah, as far as fish go, honestly, Alabama processes, sometimes we process more blue crab than Maryland. We are way up there on sort of like the crab processing. A lot of shrimp, tons of shrimp come through Alabama, and oysters. Very few fin fish are processed in Alabama. And actually, I don't know anybody processing actual fin fish in Alabama, but most of the fin fish we get comes from like Pensacola and Destin, which is my Pensacola is like 20 miles from my house. And so it's sort of like right in that area, right on the Florida, Alabama line. Mississippi and Louisiana too are really close. That's sort of that stretch of land there.
Okay.
But yeah, we get awesome fish, like snapper, grouper, lots of secondary species. And we serve
let's talk about that a little bit, because that's
for sure.
interesting, because that's something I'm kind of interested in now that, we've got Tempest here, and we're hyper focused on South Atlantic seafood, right? Like that's our jam because it's where we're at. And I want to kind of push that narrative. And so we've been looking a lot at those secondary species like you're talking about. So talk about that a little bit. And what species do you guys have that you like to use? Do you think is good eating?
Yeah, one of my favorite are beeliner snappers. And they look almost exactly like a red snapper. They eat like a red snapper. They're always smaller fish.
Yep.
They're not big fish.
Yeah. Well, they're usually like what, like 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds?
Yeah, that's a big one. 2 pounds is a big one.
Yeah.
And we buy them whole as 1 pound fish, and I almost always serve them whole.
Yeah.
And they make a really good size to eat. And then they're like hundreds of snapper species, and almost all of them taste the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
And they're delicious. Like whether the skin is red or not, or yellow or striped or whatever, like they almost all eat exactly the same. And, that's odd. That's really delicious fish. There are things like porgy, which I really like. There's just a ton, like alternate species of grouper. Grouper is one of those fish you got to be careful of because they are so overfished. But there are 20 species of grouper that are abundant, and as long as you're not ordering, honestly, most Gulf grouper is on the safe to eat Monterey Bay list right now. But like there's Kitty Mitchell, and there's red, and there's black, and there's scamp.
There's scamp, and
there's
all
tons.
Those guys,
There's sort of the fish that are kind of like grouper that like from here, like wreckfish for sure. I think it's in grouper family, which I love, which is secondary species. But really, whenever you get the chance to order a secondary species, you really should. Overfishing is a giant problem.
Yep.
And lots of people are taking really good care of the fisheries. Like in Alabama, for instance, there was a time when red snapper, you could not harvest red snapper for commercial fishing. And so the state of Alabama decided that we were going to make a bunch of artificial reefs. And so we sunk a bunch of boats offshore, and we created these artificial reefs. Now, it took us a while to convince NOAA and the Monterey Bay Aquarium that the species had rebounded enough to take it off of the do not, eat or fish list. Yeah. And so, it took some science and some convincing, but ultimately it was done, and it makes the Alabama area of red snapper like one of the best examples of a rebounding population really in the country. It's an example that everyone points to, and it's just because we made people stop fishing for a little bit.
Yep.
We made reefs, and then the species, and now like you can't, it's hard to catch something that's not red snapper sometimes just because they're like aggressive everywhere. And they're everywhere, which is awesome,
that's what they're delicious too.
Yeah, they're delicious. That's what you want. There are other things like invasive species are a huge deal. And I don't know if lionfish have made it up here yet, but they probably will soon.
Yeah, I think they've seen some, but it's not like, they're not prevalent.
Yeah.
But they have seen some, and they're like, there's some murmurs about like, oh shit, like once this happens, you're going to have to go after them.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, lionfish are freaking delicious.
Yeah.
Like if you ever have a chance to eat or buy lionfish,
I've had it. It's awesome.
It is a wonderful fish. They are so good to eat. And,
because they eat everything.
Yes, they
eat like everything down there that makes their flesh like sweet and delicious. It's almost like, I think of it as like a monkfish.
Yeah, they're eating a lot of crustaceans. They're breaking up rocks. They're just sort of slowly. They don't move very fast because they don't have to.
Right.
And people are like, oh, aren't they poisonous? And they are mildly poisonous, but honestly, it's very easy to clean them if you're a chef. You can either, some people like scissor off the spines. But honestly, if you just sort of like hold your hand over the spines, like
don't let them pop up.
Yes, chefs who break down fish will understand that like
those fins will get you.
Those fins will get you, even if they're poisonous or not. So so you gotta be careful. You learn quickly how to avoid them, and really, if you just fillet them like a normal fish, they're really easy to deal with. But the thing that makes them so, most people think that they started in Miami. Like people were just like tired of having them in their fish tanks, so they would just drop them in the waters in Miami. Yeah, like in the canals in Miami.
Right.
And so they have no natural predators because they are poisonous.
Yeah. Well, and they're spiny. Like get other fish would eat them because they're delicious, but you can't get to them because they have those poisonous spikes. Yeah, and so they have no natural predators, and then they've spread all the way, all the way around the Gulf of Mexico, and they're starting to go up the Atlantic. Now they're definitely a tropical fish, so how far will they get?
How far will they get is kind of a question, but I mean, species.
Well,
they change.
The issue is like the Gulf Stream, right? Like all that warm water is being pushed north, so like they can take the waters are creeping warm north, so like we'll see how far they get. Yeah. So do you cook with lionfish?
Whenever they're available, I always buy them, and we have a lionfish rodeo in Alabama, which is kind of cool.
Okay.
The thing about-
Do tell.
It's basically where
The images are firing off in my head now.
Well, it's basically where a bunch of people. It's like a fishing contest,
Yeah.
right? Like
Everybody just goes out in their boats.
Everyone goes out and tries to get them.
They're in dinghies. They're in boats. They're in.
The other thing that makes them really hard to catch is they won't take a hook either. So you have to basically dive for them. And people are getting really creative on how to catch them. Like I've seen contraptions which are like vacuum cleaners that people strap on their backs that basically like
suck
them up like really fast.
And they have like a filter in there that catches them.
They catch it. Yeah, they go they're just on their back and you see them unload. I've also seen people like modify guns that can shoot underwater like Glocks to be like spear pistols that people are using to take care of them.
Yeah.
And so people are getting really creative as to like how to catch them.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're
one of spearfishing is the big thing that everybody's doing in Florida and like stuff like that. They just spear for them.
Yeah, that's for sure. You've got to dive for them.
Yeah.
And so,
do you guys have a lot of like sport fishing going on around there? Like people come to Mobile and like they have like the sport boats that go out fishing for snapper or whatever.
Yeah, well, very close to Mobile. Mobile is very close to the Alabama beaches, which are gorgeous, and that's really where all of the charter fishing boats launch from, and there are a lot of them. And it is really good fishing in the Gulf. I mean, it's the bay. The bay is the bay. It's really weird. Like it's a large, shallow, flat strip of land, water that has a lot of really good stuff in it. But, the sort of the sport fishing is a little bit farther south of the bay.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. So, let's talk about what brings you here.
Yeah.
I think you and I met in Charleston for season 14.
Oh, yeah.
Top Chef. Remember that?
I was trying to think of a non-Top Chef thing that we may have met at in Charleston. But no, we definitely met here in Charleston.
We met here in Charleston.
Top Chef.
Yeah. And and I think you've been back for Wine and Food multiple times. I missed you last year. Were you here last year?
No, I didn't. I think last year was the first year back, right?
Yeah. Well,
or was it?
We had one pre-pandemic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then pandemic kind of shut it down for a minute.
Yeah.
There might have been one or two pre-pandemic. I don't know. My time is all messed up.
Yeah.
But was this last year your first?
Last year was the first year I'd done Wine and Food.
And I missed you last year. How was?
No, we ran into each other briefly.
Did we?
Very briefly. I was doing a demo and you were.
Oh, I ran up and said, "Hey," while you were on stage.
Yeah.
That's right. I remember that.
Yeah, I found you afterwards for a very brief hug after the event on the last day. So. But yeah, it's Charleston Wine and Food is here. I'm here cooking at my buddy's restaurant, Anthony Marini. His restaurant's called The Pass, which is a really cool sandwich shop. And Anthony, there's lots of sort of Italian-inspired sandwiches. It's not just an Italian sandwich shop, but my buddy Anthony loves to embrace his Italianness, and so it is for sure. There's a lot of a beautiful like Italian kind of sandwiches, and he does lots of really cool stuff. Honestly, I'm really proud of him. Like I worked for him years ago in Birmingham, and he's an amazingly talented chef. He really gets it. He was a culinary school teacher for a while. Just one of those guys one of the chefs who I just have a ton of respect for. Like I learned so much from this guy, and I'm really glad to see he is just crushing it here in Charleston with the sandwich shop. That's the thing we were at the kickoff event. And I was, hanging out with him last night, and he was doing like some tasting menus in the sandwich shop kind of in the evening, like a couple of week. And people are like no lie, like, probably 40 people were like, "Hey, when are you bringing back those dinners at the sandwich shop?" People are like chomping at the bit to eat his food, and it makes me really glad that the sort of Philadelphia Yankee, guy has done so well in the South.
That's awesome. I have not met him yet. You have to get us connected. I'd love to pick his brain. Maybe
his sandwiches really are fire. Like everything he's making there is really cool.
Awesome. I'll definitely check it out. Maybe I'll come try to swing by while you're around. Charleston's interesting in a way that like. It's not a huge town, right? It's a small city, and so the population isn't huge here, but there's a lot of tourism and stuff like that. The dining culture here is really good. Like people are willing to give things a shot. Like a chef run sandwich shop. Like people will get behind stuff like that if it's good, right? And if it's consistent, and you deliver, right? If you deliver, people will get behind it. We started doing this tasting menu night at Tempest, just for me, because like I'm opening restaurants all over the place, and it's like I'm not on the path the way that I used to be running the kitchens the way, and I miss it. My connection to like the my guests and stuff like that. So we were hosting this tasting menu thing, and we got like really great feedback on it. Like people came out for this multi-course thing and really excited about something different, and so it's super fun, and there's a lot of cool stuff to do.
Yeah, I love the scene in Charleston, and Mobile is a lot like Charleston. A lot of these coastal cities have a really similar kind of feel,
Yep.
Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans even.
Yep.
And, Mobile is a lot like that, even smaller than Charleston.
Yeah.
And so, that's one of those things, like lots of chefs are, leaving New York City, and, like they want to go to places where they don't have to spend $10 million to open a restaurant. And that's why I'm in Mobile, after being the state executive chef for 8 years, I tried to find investors, good luck trying to find people to give you money. You know what I mean? And, I tried to, and people who who are friends of mine who are like crazy wealthy, try to get somebody to loan you $100,000. It's hard. You know what I mean? It's really difficult. So, if you're in a smaller market, you'll get a better deal on a building. And the building I'm in now is a historic area. And it was a teaching restaurant for a Virginia college culinary school, which, all of Virginia colleges shut down like 5 or 6 years ago. And they had a bunch of culinary schools and these restaurants associated with the culinary schools. And so, when the college shut down, they just locked the doors. And so, here's this space with equipment. And,
they had a restaurant operating in it.
Yes. And so, I scrounged every penny I had and sort of like, hey, here it is. I'm pushing all in. And so we opened on January 7th of 2020. Nice. What else could go wrong? I finally get my dream restaurant. I poured every penny into this thing that I own, and there you go.
So how did you make it? That had to have been devastating, right?
It was totally devastating.
I'm realizing my dream. I was like, I'm making it happen, and then the carpet gets ripped out from under you.
Yeah,
right?
that's it exactly. January 7th, 2020 was opening night. Like every chef during the pandemic, you try to figure out what do you need to do, and lots of chefs I feel like made the wrong decisions, and lots of chefs made just overreacting. Do you really need to change your concept 6 times to get people to come in? Probably not. If you've been an established restaurant, you probably don't need to switch from a seafood restaurant to a pizza joint just because you think you can do more to go sales, right?
Yep.
And so I think a lot of people made mistakes, but for us, it was just I'm just going to do what I do, and it's just going to be me and my wife every single day doing curbside and to deliver to go. And, being in the South, people were way willing to quickly get through the, reopen up dining room spaces. And we were definitely the last in our area to do that kind of stuff, but still way ahead of the national curve.
Right.
And it's just one of those things nobody knows, you follow the CDC instructions, you go to your, honestly, there were talks with James Beard Foundation, like once a month, people in your region, getting together on Zoom calls to talk about this is working for me and that's working for me. And, living in the South also means that I didn't have to buy things I didn't have to buy the special air filters,
Right. Yeah. And you had a little bit more lenient kind of.
Yeah, definitely more lenient. But, I did what everybody did. I just, strapped in, got down and just try to figure out what to do every single day.
Were you able to get any of the help, the financial help from any of those?
It was wildly difficult for us. We did finally get some PPP money, but things like the, what was the big one at the very beginning, the
EIDL,
the EIDL, we were not able to get any EIDL loans. And honestly, because, when you open a restaurant in January, the pandemic hits in March.
Right.
Your people are giving restaurants tons of money, and it's all based on your previous 2 years of sales. Well,
you got no set. You're I've got there's 2 months of sales. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, I would be happy to make an average of 12 months based off of this 1 month of sales we have.
Yeah.
But finally, they loosened the restrictions because people realized that there were lots of people who were in the same situation that I was.
Right.
How do you show how much money your restaurant is worth when you have a month of business to look at?
Right.
And so, but we eventually got that help. And, I think that sort of the same thing with that. I think a lot of people made wise decisions. I think a lot of people made poor decisions. I think that, there's going to be a time, I think that some people kind of get suspicious about, there's rapid expansion of concepts and restaurants that I kind of give a little bit of a side eye to. I think that probably you'll see a lot of places that people are trying to expand with money that they had from the government fall quickly. I think
Yeah.
I think a lot of I think you'll see a lot of that in the next coming months and years. And
Yep.
it's weird to know. Honestly, like we got the money and we use it only for the purposes of feeding our, paying our employees and then doing any sort of like, PPE and sort of like very strict on what we can spend it on that money on.
Yeah.
And I feel like we would have made it without it, but it certainly was it was a giant help.
Yeah. So how long were you closed for?
We were only closed for about a month before we started doing
too bad.
curbside.
I mean, that's
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did the curbside stuff work for you?
It worked initially,
Yeah.
but then people just got tired of it really quickly. And, but Mobile's a small town. And so like, if all of our neighbors come by and grab something, I'm not going to see them for like another week or whatever,
Right.
or
it wasn't consistent and really didn't.
It wasn't consistent, but it was something,
Yeah.
and it certainly wasn't consistent enough to get, to meet the case minimums of what we need to order from,
from any of your purveyors.
Yes, from the purveyors.
Like, sorry.
Yeah.
How big is the Hummingbird Way?
We have about 60 seats inside and a patio that can seat about 30. So a good medium-sized restaurant. It's not a small restaurant, but it's not some 300-seat behemoth either.
Yeah.
So.
60 is good. And and you can do, I mean, if you can get to 90, that's on a nice day. And plus your weather's amazing. So, I mean, you can use your patio probably, like 10 months out of the year, maybe?
It gets to be too hot to eat outside.
Oh, so in the summer. Yeah. Well, we get that too here. It's like in the middle of like July or August, it's a little brutal to even be outside. Like you can't breathe.
Yeah. Mobile is that for sure. And so, but no.
You can get those like little spray fans with the mister.
The mister, yeah. But, this year's been so crazy because, like in December, people are wanting to sit outside and we don't even have to turn like the patio heaters on,
Right.
and so we get a longer, from like now is a great patio season for us, but as soon as it hits May, it's going to be like, people are going to be like, where's the air conditioner immediately? It's, 100 degrees and 100% humidity outside. And it's like walking into soup as soon as you step out the door. But that's the South. That's everywhere.
You just got to deal with it. Like, let's get back to food a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your menu.
Yeah.
What is the stuff on your menu right now that's like, that you're super proud of, that's inspiring you, that you're like, like I think as chefs, like we're always kind of like evolving, at least the good ones are trying to like, you don't just do the same thing over and over again. You're like, you're kind of like, hey, what dishes has got you pumped right now?
Yeah, there are several on our menu that I really love. Our restaurant is kind of unique too in that we do offer a tasting menu every single night. And so we have an a la carte menu and a 5-course tasting menu every night available. And we're super flexible with it. Like I remember dining in New York in like the 2000s and 90s, like tasting menu or nothing, or tasting menu or a la carte. And there's no, but like if somebody really wants to get the oyster with caviar on the tasting menu, that's fine. We'll sell you a caviar oyster. Or if one person at your party wants to have a tasting menu and the other person doesn't, that's fine. I'm cool with that too. It makes it kind of weird sometimes for the timing, but I'm willing to take that weirdness on to make it work right. But there are things like I could not find. There are really great Asian restaurants in that part of the country because there's a giant Vietnamese population there. Lots of them after the Vietnam War moved to New Orleans, Mobile, Houston. That kind of area has a giant Asian population that's really inspires the dishes. But I was having a hard time in Mobile finding a good curry. And so I was like, okay, here it comes.
He's going down the rabbit hole.
We're going down the rabbit hole, yeah. And so we do a whole fried flounder with like a red kind of curry with, peanuts and lots of mint and basil. And, it's a 1 pound whole fried fish that's got this awesome, we usually do either clams or mussels in the curry as well. And so that's a dish that I really love. And it's really just born of, I really wanted some curry, and it was one of those things.
Nobody's doing curry, and I need it.
Yes, that's an example. Something ended up on the menu because I wanted it on. I wanted to eat it. But then people like it so much, they have the same sort of reaction that I do. It's become one of those things that it's hard to take off the menu because people come in just for the curry.
Yep. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's one of the things they're surprised. You're like, we have a wedge salad on our menu. It's sort of the same thing. Like, it's a wedge salad. It's a great wedge salad. But it's a romaine lettuce salad that we grill. You know, it's a little bit unique. You know, it's
you put like your little like, tweak on it, but it's like it is what you think it is.
It's sometimes surprising what people grow to love at your restaurant. You know, like, would I have ever thought that my wedge salad was one of those things that people are like, come to the restaurant for a wedge salad? No.
I hate to break it to you, Jim. It's not your wedge salad. They're going to come for the wedge. They're going to come because they do it to us too.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
But I do want to ask you, you touched on something. Is like, do you find your regular guests or guests that have they trust you to do interesting and cool stuff where they'll come in and say, okay, chef, like, give me something new today. Like what should I have? Right. Like, you know what I like. I come every like couple times a month. Do you find that happening?
They do. I find that I'm one of those chefs, you know, like you and I grew up sort of in the same kind of kitchens cooking. I mean, like you are obviously much nicer kitchens than I grew up cooking in, but at the same time, there was a feeling, you know, when we were learning to be chefs that it was the chefs would hide it. They would stay in the kitchen. They would not leave. You would have your front of the house person like talk to the tables, and like chefs could hide in the kitchen and not interact with people. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. And sometimes, you know, like if half your staff doesn't show up and I'm working saute station, you know, like I'm not going to go talk to people after that. But for me, I feel like chefs have to be in the dining room. And, you know, like I usually work the pass. And that is really easy to then sort of like, you know where all the tables are and what they're eating. You know who you need to talk to. You can look around the corner. You know, you're talking to the servers. And then you go and you talk to I like to go to every table, especially like while they have their entrees. Mm-hmm. And just sort of like talk to them, you know, about what they've had. You know, like, you know, just sort of when they get their entrees. That's when I like to talk to them. But I do find that when I want to put something like interesting and like super creative and things like, will people in this town buy this? You know, like it may require some selling of some of it, but ultimately you usually find out that they'll buy those kind of things. I mean, you know, not a super revolutionary dish, but I remember like I was making like a, you know, scallop pasta. You know, people use that technique where you put the scallops in the blender and you add xanthan and then you cryovac them and sous vide it and you make like noodles out of it. And I was like, I want to do that dish. I've never done that before. I want to try to make that kind of a dish. And so, I made that dish. And you know, when you put scallop pasta on a menu, people are going to think about a certain thing. They're not going to think, oh, they're going to think
scallop noodles.
Yes, they're not going to think
the noodles are scallop. They're thinking angel hair with seared scallops.
Yes, absolutely. Right. And so, you know, you realize that sometimes you have to push the guests in that direction. But once they grow to trust you, they're willing to do the kind of stuff that you want them to do. And so, I find that people will trust. And the same with wine too. Like I really care a lot about our wine program. And, you know, I try to do things like, yes, at my restaurant, we can sell $300 bottles of Napa Cab all day. And, you know, but I love those wines, but I'm more interested in, you know, like, can I convince somebody to order this, you know, the bottle of wine that's the same price from, you know, some odd sub-region of the Burgundy, you know what I mean? Like something that people may have never heard of or interested in, or, you know, like, you know, the Slovenian wine, or, you know, like and I find that people, once you get their trust, you can push them where you want to take your food. Yeah.
What is it that interests you about those obscure things, regions, techniques, things like that you like to try to bring to the table?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about learning and knowledge and continuing to adapt. And it's like you said a second ago, the good chefs are always evolving. Like you can never think, okay, like, oh yeah, these are my 10 dishes. I'm going to make those 10 dishes at every restaurant for the rest of my life. If that's what you're doing, I feel sorry for you. You know what I mean? Like
that sounds boring and like sad to me.
Yes, it's exactly boring and sad. But yeah, it's all about, you know, continuing to press yourself and to learn and to open up, you know, new ideas and flavors and trying new things. And, you know, sometimes it is difficult. On a serious note, you know, the food that I make has roots in Southern cuisine. You know, Southern cuisine has roots in, you know, the slave trade. And, you know, like it is very hard and it's a very serious issue. You know, like I would never call food that I make soul food. But do we serve collard greens in my restaurant? Absolutely. Do we serve things? Do we serve grits? Yes, absolutely. You know, and things that are, you know, my food history are tied up in things that are disgusting. And it's a really hard line to walk, you know, like
when you say tied up in things that are disgusting, elaborate on that.
Yeah. Well, you know,
because I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, like Fried okra. One of my favorite things. We serve when okra season's in. We serve it at the restaurant. But the only reason why there's okra here is because of the slave trade directly from Africa. And it's hard. As a white guy, it's hard to know where where paying homage stops, like where embracing my food heritage stops, and where using it to
appropriation of somebody. Yes. There's a line there for sure.
There's a real line there, and
it's a little blurry.
It is blurry, and it's hard to know. And so I have started using and things like I've started using berry spice, which is not an American ingredient. That is straight up an African ingredient.
Yep.
And I really have started using it just because it tastes so freaking great.
You know what I mean? I have it. We have it in our restaurant too.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, so being in Charleston, we share a lot of that kind of heritage, right? And I decided when we opened here, like 7-8 years ago, I was like, first of all, I didn't know anything about low country cooking or Gullah Geechee culture. Like I knew nothing about it. I'm from the North. Like I don't know anything about it. And so to try to, all of our menus vary a little bit based on what location they're in. And so I kind of did this deep dive into that whole West African slave culture history. And really it was about just kind of scratching the surface to learn a little bit about how some of this shit got here.
Yeah.
Like how did rice get here?
Yeah.
How did rice didn't start here.
Yeah.
Okay. That got brought over.
Yeah.
And as a result of trade and stuff. And so anyways, point being is that I have very, very spice. I don't serve low country cuisine, but I like to use accents of that in my cooking because it tells the story, right? It's the evolution. It's the same way that our country evolves, right? It's your cooking evolves based out of the experiences and the history that you have. And so, I start to dabble in that stuff. I never cooked with field peas.
Yeah.
Until I moved to the South.
Yeah.
We don't eat that in Boston. You don't eat field peas. You eat baked beans.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I love field peas and they're amazing. And there's so many varieties with different textures and things. And so, so that's a result of that, right? Learning this stuff came from Africa. Let's that's a huge part of our history here. Let's learn how to cook with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, I feel the same way too. And I never really try to it's not like would ever try to take or maybe I might. I mean, I have curry on my menu, but it's weird to know. It's just weird to know, where, how to pay respect and homage. My wife is from China. And so lots of Chinese ingredients find their way into my cooking, but I'm definitely not cooking with those ingredients.
You're not cooking Asian food.
The way in which she cooks with them at home is very different than what I do with them. And so it is. Does
your wife do the cooking?
At home?
Yeah.
Yeah, mostly.
And what is her cooking like?
Well, she is a Chinese citizen. She is, she was born and raised, and she moved to the United States for college, for graduate school.
So was she 19 or 18?
No, older than that. She had for graduate school. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
for graduate school in the States.
In her 20s or something, she moved here? Okay.
Yeah. And she's from Wuhan originally.
Okay.
And her family is all still there. And, but she does most of the cooking at home. And honestly, Chinese food at home, but for most of the cooking is always welcome for me. And I mean, chefs understand this too, is I really don't want to go home and feel like I just went back to work.
Yeah.
And it sucks cooking at home. I tell people this all the time too. When you're in a commercial restaurant, your equipment is real. And your pots and pans are the right size. And, you have a cutting board that you can actually cut stuff on. It's not like a 3-inch square.
Right.
And so,
it doesn't spill out onto the countertop.
Yeah. When you're cooking, for me, when I'm cooking at home, everything feels like you're using an easy bake oven. And not only do I not want to feel like I'm at work, but it's just hard to do stuff well. Excuse me, something on my teeth.
Yeah.
It's hard to do stuff well, or the way you want to when you're cooking on an easy bake oven.
Right.
I live in an apartment. We have an electric range, I know that not a good one, there are plenty of great electric ranges out there, but not what I have. And so, it's just, I don't know.
So what's her cooking like? I want to know, I want to know what she cooks for you and how it sizes up.
We eat lots of vegetables for sure. We eat lots of sauteed greens and garlic. There's we eat lots of noodles.
Mm-hmm.
And And for any home
Wheat
cooks,
or rice?
both, all of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So any noodle,
Yeah.
you guys are all about it.
Yeah, instant noodles. For people listening, there are amazing instant noodles out there. Like, and you're really looking for the ones like if you have an Asian market and you have an instant noodle that's like a bag, it's almost 9 times out of 10 delicious. You know,
Okay.
like it's like not Manchurian ramen, but you can get like awesome like pre-made like stuff that what people eat in China for home. You have various noodles and.
And it's better than what we know as ramen.
Yes.
It's like,
it's so much better. It's
Yeah, yeah.
wildly. You know, like you throw an egg in there and a piece of bacon and you like have an awesome meal. You know? And she cooks a lot. We eat a lot of like congee and sort of some traditional kind of
Does she
stuff.
cook mostly like Chinese?
Yeah.
Okay.
She does try to cook. We have an air fryer now too. And so she
started playing with
some air fryer stuff,
Yeah.
you know.
How's that going?
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. You know, I tried to use air fryer. The first time I tried to use air fryer was, I was like, yeah, high temperature, convection. I was like, I'm going to put a pizza in there. Do not try to put a pizza in your air fryer at home. It does not work very well.
That's amazing. My brother has an air fryer, and I was out visiting like last year or something, and he's like, I thought it was a coffee maker.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was. I'm like, what is this thing? He's like, that's an air fryer. He's like, you ever use one? I was like, never. Right. And he's like, well, why don't you try to like do something there? I was like, no, like, I'm not going to put it in your little kitchen robot thing. Like I'm going to cook the way chefs do, like on a range. You know what I mean? That's funny. Cool. All right. So back to the like Asian ingredients, Chinese ingredients kind of showing up and you're cooking like a little bit, but you don't cook kind of like a,
Not usually, but things like if say for instance, you know, she brings home some awesome chili oil and, you know, like the ingredients to like are out there for me to make like a version of that chili oil, you know, like our chili crisp or whatever kind of like cool chili thing that's Asian and Chinese that has made it over to the market. You know, like I will add those in ways that are not for sure the way in which Chinese people cook with that.
Right. They'd be like, what are you doing with that?
But what I find is that American diners, they just never exposed to some of these tastes. And they're like, what is that thing that makes this dish so good? And you can say, oh, well, you know, that's the chili oil, or that's the berry spice, or, you know, that's the, you know, the whatever it is that, you know, we're taking and incorporating and, you know, I don't know. It's tough, you know, like, you want to pay respect to the ingredients and you want to treat them in ways and you want to introduce people to flavors that they've never had. But that is sort of like one of those daily struggles with me. And that's how it ties back to the sort of like, where do you draw the line? You know, like, you know, if two white dudes who are from, you know, Michigan, you make one trip to Nashville and they decide this Nashville chicken thing is the best thing I've ever had. And they decide to go and open up a franchise of Nashville hot chicken places and open 15 of them across the country. You're like, that to me seems like the shadiness.
Yeah.
You know, like, or were they just inspired? You know, like that's that, but it's way more the shadiness. You know what I mean? Like it's way more the shadiness.
Right.
And it's hard to know, you know, another thing, and you're being someone who had a farm or has a farm, you know, like, if I go to somebody's restaurant and they say that they're growing stuff that's on their menu, I give them some serious side eye because like if you say that you're growing stuff on the restaurant grounds, and I pulled up to your restaurant, I see your restaurant grounds.
Where? Show me
like,
where those tomato plants are, because I know that they take some space.
If you're talking about that pot of thyme you have at the front door, like I know
that doesn't count.
That does not count. Every restaurant has a pot of thyme at the front door, and anyone who tries to grow mint in their backyard knows that restaurants, you need like an acre of mint, you know, a month. You can't be like your little raised bed with your 3 mint plants has lasted like 5 minutes in the restaurant. You know, like you can't like, and don't try to make it seem like you're some revolutionary in the restaurant business because you have a few flower pots in your backyard. That is not, you know, like that is taking something that people need to focus on, something that's really important to all of us moving forward to make sure that we have sustainable food in the future. And then like, just sort of like paying lip service and making your Instagram post, you know, like to me, that's just a load of crap, you know, like, and it makes me mad. You know?
Totally.
It makes me mad.
I mean, part of the reason so I'm glad you touched on my farm. I don't have it anymore, by the way. We sold it in the pandemic. That was like when we closed all the restaurants, I was like, okay, what am I going to do with this, you know, 6 acres? We did it legit. Yeah. And the reason for that was like, because the purpose of that was not so that I could put put it on my menu, right? Not to advertise it. For me, that was about the evolution. It's about I'm so wrapped up in where I'm at, right? And using local ingredients and stuff like that. I need to understand this better. Yeah. I have to know how this works and understand the ingredients better because, I needed some inspiration. And so getting your hands dirty that way, man, like that, I had the farm for 3 years. We grew on it for two full seasons. And it was fucking huge. We had 4 plots that were 100 feet long by, I think they were 30 feet wide. So we had like 6 rows on each plot and they were 100 feet long.
Farm work is hard.
Dude, it's no fucking joke.
It's a hard work.
And so in the style of farming that we did, because I was concerned about sustainability was like human scale is what we called it. So like we didn't want to have tractors. We did not want to have machinery doing the work. Like it all had to be work that we could do with our hands. We did have like a little walk behind tractor thing that was an amazing tool for making beds and shit. Holy smokes. I got introduced to that. So that thing was great. But everything was like hand tools. It was hand weeders, hose, like all that stuff. So it took a lot of time. Yeah.
Like if you're moving your chicken pens to aerate your land or whatever, like that is work.
Yeah.
That is real labor.
They don't do it themselves. Somebody's got to do that. And so that was amazing. And I highly recommend to anybody, especially chefs, that like if you have a farmer that you're cool with or that you use, like if you can spend a day off helping out there, just like doing whatever. Yeah. I remember, that's how it started for me, right? As I started just going out and helping one of my farmer buddies just to learn about what he did and like digging the potatoes and like stuff like that. I was like, potatoes are ready in the middle of summer. Yeah. Okay. So like when you start digging potatoes, it's like August. Yeah. It's, September. It's hot as shit. You're covered in dirt. And you're doing it by hand. Like we didn't have machines to like, just pull them out of the ground. So it created that appreciation for the ingredient that changed the way I cook. Right. So like now I remember pre kind of Top Chef days, I was very motivated about being creative with my food and trying to come up with the coolest combinations and techniques and things like that. Because that's just what I was doing. And then, fast forward to like now after the farm and stuff, like it's all about the ingredient. It's like, what am I trying to do with this to make it the best version of itself and deliver that to my guest?
Oh, that's an awesome place to start.
And it's a hard challenge.
It is,
man. Like trying to make just like a carrot blow somebody's mind is fucking hard.
It is,
because like we're used to this bullshit from the restaurant or from the grocery store. Yeah. Right. That is not an organic, from the ground, earthy terroir carrot. Yeah. It's like some watery, crispy piece of cardboard. Yeah. Yeah. It's not inspiring. Yeah. But if you get a local carrot that's been organically raised without like all this stuff and like has been out of the ground for 24 hours. Yeah. You can taste the layers.
Oh, yeah, you can taste it.
It's amazing.
Absolutely. The terroir is a great way to describe it for sure. You can taste it and the sweetness. That's the one thing that people don't like, the sweetness of an awesome carrot. You just maybe not even think about that, but you're right. What's available in the grocery stores is 9 times out of 10 trash. It's this giant commodity farming, and it's a really huge problem in America, globally, is the commodity farming. No. That actually, I'm kind of excited. Like one thing that I'm super passionate about, and I'm in the process of opening a farm myself, but it's not at least it's not as initially going to be like a farm for growing vegetables or animals or whatever, where I'm definitely making a compost farm. Like I'm shopping for land right now.
Nice.
And
also hard work.
And I'm just going to start with the restaurant, you know, and what we'll do is, it's really infuriating because lots of places don't really have good recycling programs. And where I live in Mobile, there is no one is even thinking about composting at all. Yep. And, restaurants produce so much compostable waste that all ends up in landfills. It's crazy. Restaurants are one of the biggest problems with landfill overcrowding, just because all of the stuff that we could be composting ends up in the landfills. And when it's in with all that other non-compostable stuff, it creates really bad stuff environmentally. Like the gases are wrong. Like it's causing things not to break down the right way. Yep. And so restaurants, like I really do, it's hard to know, like, if you put your plastic in the recycling bin, does it really get recycled? You know, is it really doing much environmental good? One thing that you will really do know, as it's anyone who works in the restaurant industry, is there is lots of stuff that goes in that trash can. You know, if a head of lettuce didn't make it in time, you know, you can't really save something like a watery piece of lettuce, but can you find some use for it that can be beneficial down the road? And you're like, well, if it's going to landfill, it's not doing anything. But if it's going in your compost bin, at least you know that it's, you know, you're paying it forward, that head of lettuce, at least a little bit, you know.
Yes.
And I'm really excited about it. It's something that's going to be a little bit difficult for sure.
Yes.
But things that are difficult are often the most rewarding, you know?
So we did composting at our farm, and that shit is hard, man.
Yeah.
So I ended up buying like those big roller bins like, for your trash, right? With the lid. And we had one of those in the kitchen, and I had one at the farm. So it was on a rotation, and we filled that thing up, dude. Like it got filled about 4 days. Yeah. And it was like full with, and it's heavy. Yeah. I'm talking like maybe 200 or 300 pounds, maybe more. Maybe 500, I don't know. It's hard for me to roll the damn thing. Yeah. And like we would load that thing on the back of my truck, take it to the farm and dump it into our compost bin. And then we turned it by hand. Yeah. But the coolest part about that is that we used zero organic matter, purchased organic matter to fertilize our farm. Yeah. The second season that we opened. It was all byproduct from waste, the stuff that would have been garbage. Yeah. We turned it into product that we served at the restaurant. Yeah. By fertilizing our carrots and our greens and all that stuff. It was amazing. So what's your plan for that? Like, so what does this look like to you? Yeah. Well, my plan is to, I'm definitely going to use small bins instead of big ones. Smart. Yep. Okay. That's smart. Do that. Small bins for sure. But yeah, my plan is to start with maybe it's hard to know. How much poundage of waste that is, compostable come out of the restaurant every day? Yep. Is it 300 pounds? Is it 100 pounds? I really don't know. Yeah. And so, but yeah, that is my plan. Ultimately, I would like to, if I find that it works well and I can recruit other people, I would like to, get the other restaurants locally involved and, picking them up. Initially, this is going to be me as the truck driver taking the compost to the compost farm. Yep. But eventually, I would like it to be a business. Ultimately, I've got to find some way to make it work, and if that involves selling the compost on the back end or what, that's what's going to happen. Because eventually, hopefully, I'm going to need employees and right, something to package the compost in. And so I want it to be a business. If it ends up not being a business and being like a project, a nonprofit or a project, but I think that especially in Alabama, it's probably going to need to be a business to work, right? Just because the way it's not like California where there's there's a line of people out the door for compost startups or things like that. It's in Alabama, I'm gonna have to do some selling. I'm really gonna have to convince people that I'm not some hippie trying to take their leftover lettuce out of the trash can. But that's largely what my sustainability is. That same thing, right? You got to convince people that it's good for them. Yep. In a non-hippie sounding way. To do things that are good for the world around us. You wouldn't think it's such a hard sell, but a lot of times it is. As soon as people think you're coming at them with some leftist agenda, they immediately shut you down. But if you explain to them hey, you may never be able to fish for red snapper in the next 10 years unless you get your act together, they kind of understand. But yeah. What do you mean no more snapper? Exactly. Okay. Yeah. I'll stop dumping my stuff into the ocean. Yeah. But yeah, that's my plan for this, and I am really excited about it. I'm super excited about it, and it's something I really want to do. Chefs, we used to walk around with buckets and say if you're looking at your line cook's bucket bin on their station, you see that there's a quarter of that onion that they didn't use it well enough, and you want it to be more than what's just going into the stockpile or whatever you're doing, chefs would yell at you for the waste that was in your bucket. And, for me, I would rather, waste is inevitable at restaurants. Obviously you want to use as much as possible at your restaurant the first time, but so much of it is food that's coming back uneaten. And if you, for me, in Alabama, a restaurant in the South, we serve giant portions of stuff. Some of it is cartoonishly big, I will serve a boneless
2-pound ribeye. You know what I mean? Like, we will serve, we will make like a 1-pound whole fried fish on a plate. Like we do a lot of that in my restaurant. And, ultimately there's a lot of food, even if people love it, by the time they get to their entree, which is a 2-pound steak, either they take it home or they don't. And so doing something with what people don't take home has become important to me.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm excited about that project. I can't wait to hear more about it and pick your brain about it and how it goes and stuff. Because once you start wheeling that compost around, I want to follow back and see how that's going. But it's super rewarding. It's just it is hard work, but you do get that also the feel good part of it, which is that that you're doing something right. Yeah. Even if it's hard or maybe doesn't make money or whatever, it's the right thing to do for you, right? Cool. Well, listen, we've been chatting for about an hour. Okay. We got to go get ready for. I've got some events to get ready for. I know you do. I do for sure. Is there anything else you want to share with anybody you got going on that's exciting? Yeah, there's this one last exciting thing. I won't talk about it too much, but I've been in development with this company that's called WineView. I do own a little bit of this company, but it's an app, and it's kind of like a wine education app for both consumers and restaurant people. So, like if you're looking for your next toast integration, hit up WineView for server training and, inventory management. And it's really cool to, I've been working with this company. Wine is a huge passion of mine, has been for really as long as I've been in the industry. But it's fun. I'm excited about that too. I'm excited. I have some non-directly restaurant things that are going on that I'm super excited about. Like this WineView app is really cool. We just launched it, but it's really cool. And it's like compost farm. And I'm constantly on the lookout for new restaurants and spaces. And, I should talk to you about how to open a restaurant in a different town. It's hard. Even if it's a closed town, I know it's difficult, but the biggest problem is like the only issue that I see really with doing it is having great people working with you, right? Like you have to be able to rely on others. You have to be able to trust people to do stuff. And that's hard, I think, as chefs. It's hard for chefs to give that up. Yeah. And that's been the hardest thing for me. Yeah. Luckily I have a team who's just critical to what we're doing. And I have a team that's been with me for a long time. We didn't just blow up overnight. It's been a decade that we've been working towards where we're at. And the team's developed along the way. And now it's to the point where you realize I have to do more for them because their growth is outgrowing what I can offer. Yeah. You're hindering. I'm hindering. You're hindering their growth if you're on the pass every night. Yeah. Right? You need to give them the reins. Let them recognize that steak is overcooked and need to tell the line cook to start over. That's right. You need somebody. You need somebody else to be able to do that. Exactly. Right? So that would be my main that's main advice. Yeah. Try to find a team that you need to have. We're running a place. So cool. I think that's all I got for you, man. It's really great to see you. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure to catch up and to talk restaurant related stuff. And hell yeah. Well, and I think people are going to love this episode because if I recall, if Sheldon was not on our season, you definitely would have won fan favorite. There's no question. I like to tell myself that. Yeah, no, 100%. You were definitely a fan favorite. I think just Sheldon, he's just such an amazing person and stole the show on that. Yeah, our cast of Top Chef was so incredible. So awesome. Yeah, I will say, you especially have the disadvantage of being on 2 all-star seasons only. I know, right? Come on. You see some of these all newbie seasons, you're like, man, I wish I had been in that group. I could totally crush in this. Not to talk crap about those people, but when you're dealing with Sheldon and Brooke and Shirley and the best people who have ever been on Top Chef. Yeah. You're like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is gonna be fun. Wait, this is a camera? Okay. Okay, wait, it's okay. But I love our season. I love catching up with you, and man, it's been really, really good talk. Cool. Good to see you, bud. Yeah. Thank you. All right.